I'm going to go ahead and get started. My name is Kathy Shaw, and I'm going to moderate the evening. This microphone's a little weird, so hopefully, can you hear me all? Sort of. Is that better? Yes? Better?
You have to talk loud.
Okay, I'll talk loudly. My name is Kathy Shaw, and I'm a consultant for the city, and I'm just going to moderate this evening's panel. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. So we'll start here with Ryan Judd. He's your IT director, and he can introduce himself, and then we'll go all the way down to the end.
Okay, I'm Ryan Judd. I'm the IT manager for Kaysville City. I have a degree from SUU in engineering technology, and my background is mostly in GIS. But 15 years ago or so, I took over the IT responsibilities at Kaysville City, and I've been managing those since.
I'm Andre Lortz. I'm a member of the Technical Advisory Committee, a resident of Kaysville. My day job is being the Chief Financial Officer for Maverick.
My name is Jordan Stevenson. I'm also a voluntary member of the Technical Advisory Committee, resident of Kaysville as well. I am a CPA and I work in the utility industry. I've been in utilities for 10 years. I work for Dominion Energy as a regulatory analyst.
My name is Todd Marriott. Although I don't live here now, I am a Dart and graduated in 1985. So go Darts. I am a municipal broadband fiber expert and have had the privilege and opportunity of being involved in many of the successful municipal fiber programs throughout the country, most notably helping Utopia and UIA turn around and become successful on their own right. So just excited to be here amongst my people that I grew up with.
Well, the way the evening is going to go, The way the evening is going to go is we're going to, again, if you were here last week, we did a little bit of informative, kind of informational section at the beginning. I'll give some questions to the panel, and then they'll speak about certain topics. Then we'll open it up to you, and you can ask them questions for a period of time. And then what we'd like to do is break into kind of small groups. So all of the panel will be back at one of those posters in the back, and then we'll stay here as late as you want, asking as many questions as you want. We find that in the small groups, you might be able to ask your questions and get them answered a little more easily. So that's the plan for the evening. So we're going to start off with this question, which is a big question in the city. Why this model? Why the utility model? So for that, we're going to turn the time over to Jordan, and he's going to answer that for you.
Thank you, Kathy. So this is a question we've received, and as we go through these slides, we've tried to anticipate questions that the participants here would have. And why the utility model? As I mentioned before, I work in the utility space. And when I got started there, I had to learn a lot about why it works the way it does. Why does your gas bill change? When does it change? What about your electricity bill? Why is there only one option for electricity? Why is there only one option for gas? How does that work? And really it's made up of two main components. One is that it's an essential component of our lives. And so if you look along the Wasatch Front, 99% of residents have a connection to natural gas, for example. We all have connection to electricity, and it's become an essential component of our lives. The second component of what makes a natural kind of utility environment is that there's a lack of choice and competition. And so there's natural barriers to entry for multiple companies to provide the same service. So using natural gas as an example, since that's what my day job is in, you can imagine what it would be like to have 6 companies running parallel gas lines to each individual home and how much disruption that would cause, let alone the amount of investment. That's 6 times the amount of capital investment to allow that to occur. And that's what would be needed for us to have a choice between one gas company or the next gas company. So it's a very, very inefficient model. And in fact, when left to its own devices, what you end up with is a monopoly, an unregulated monopoly. And so as a society, we regulate those monopolies. At the gas company, we are fully regulated by the Public Service Commission, meaning we can't change rates unless we have approval from the commission. And there's a lot of regulation controlling that. If you look at the broadband industry, there are a lot of elements that lend themselves to a natural monopoly. And there's a lack of choice here in Kaysville and around the country, to be frank. There's over 700 municipal-owned fiber systems working today in the United States, and that is one of the reasons. And so when we looked at these different models, and Andre's going to talk a little bit more about the different models, but the reason why we concluded that this does lend itself to a utility model is because of those two things. It's an essential part of all of our lives, and there's a lack of competition because of the barrier to entry for multiple companies to come in and provide the level of service that we require going forward.
Thank you, Jordan. Okay, so one of the questions or one of the concepts we want to put forward at the beginning is that fiber itself is foundational for a society. So Jordan, we're going to turn that back over to you one more time.
Sure. I think you flipped the slide on accident there. So addressing the utility model is one thing related to broadband, but there are a lot of technologies available to bring service to your home. We've heard a lot about wireless technologies that are exciting. What we've landed on as the best option is fiber. And the reason for that is looking ahead over the next 30 years, there's a lot of uncertainty. And I think there's concerns about that. And if you compare all of the technologies together, fiber is one of the most future-proof, I won't say 100% future-proof, but one of the most future-proof options that we found. The reason for that is physically you can move a lot of data, and I won't get into the physics of it and the metrics, but it would take decades of compound growth in our data to max out the capacity on that fiber line. Now there's technology upgrades needed to fully maximize the potential of fiber cables themselves, but those fiber cables will last for an extremely long time, and based on our analysis, it's very unlikely that we would ever run out of capacity within the fiber line itself. The second bullet point up there is, like we mentioned with wireless technology, fiber is actually the backbone of the most exciting wireless technologies that the community is discussing, one of which is 5G. Our IT manager here actually prepared a map and showed the committee of how many towers it would take to provide 5G to a 1 mile, was it a 1 mile radius? And we'll show that. And you look at how much fiber is required for that wireless technology, and it's staggering. And so I mentioned 5G. The last bullet point up here is it feeds the local digital economy. And by digital economy, we're talking about this growing exchange of digital information that actually is becoming an industry in and of itself. I'm a member of the Kaysville City Power Board here, and something we're discussing that's coming quickly is residents are taking ownership of their own power at home by installing solar. We have batteries that are dropping in cost, and there's an exciting opportunity to swap power between homes and to balance that energy within our electric distribution system here. And all of that requires a lot of broadband in the future to have, for example, if I have an electric car and I have excess capacity on the battery or excess energy saved, and my neighbor needs it at a certain time of day, there could in the future be a moment where we have a transaction with each other digitally because those devices can talk to each other. And so these are the kind of opportunities that this kind of infrastructure will support in our city.
Thank you. Okay, so for the evening, these are the three key points we really want to get across to you this evening. One is that it's infrastructure, which is what we're going to talk about in a second. Then we're going to talk about how this benefits everybody, absolutely everybody in the society. And then finally that it's your money and that your dollars with a program like this would stay locally rather than going back east to different companies. So with that said, we're going to start with why is it infrastructure? Because if it is, then why is it? So Jordan, one more time.
Sure. Yeah, so infrastructure, I think we all know what the word infrastructure means, but it's a very, very long-term investment that will last a long time, similar to our roads, our water systems, and it lends itself to an area where you don't expect to get a very rapid return, which in the business world, if I approach a CEO or a management and I want to invest a certain amount of money, say millions and millions of dollars, there's a certain rate of return required on that capital. Infrastructure projects in and of themselves have a very, very long rate of return or a long cycle to get a payback. That's the environment that we find ourselves in with fiber, is it's more of an infrastructure project. The other component of infrastructure is that it supports the community. In fact, the word infra means under and structure, so it's a supporting foundational structure to support the city and its goals.
Okay, so now, if it's infrastructure, how will that help the city? So we're going to turn it over to Ryan now, and how we want to discuss how fiber as an infrastructure could impact your city for the positive.
Well, as I was thinking about this very question, I think we have to kind of break it out into three different parts. We have to break it out into our past, our present, and our future. And in our past, we have utilized fiber to kind of bring together our buildings and kind of solve some problems that we've been dealing with over the last 10 years ago or so. And by doing that, we were able to combine resources. We were to be able to gain some efficiencies, for example, we were able to combine all of our DSL services into one, and then we pumped it out of one building through fiber. And over the years, that's changed. And now we have better services, but we're all serving those over fiber, and we've combined our phone systems from 5 different separate phone systems into one, and we're using fiber to kind of bring all those technologies together and using. So we're having a savings. Just a year ago, as far as the present goes, we just completed an AMI project, or we're underway actually. About 9,000 water meters are installed, and about 6,000 power meters are installed. And that we're using AMI infrastructure, advanced meter infrastructure, and that infrastructure relies heavily on fiber optics. And we are utilizing a ring to kind of bring all that data back together under one roof. And but there's a lot of benefits to that ring too, besides just the AMI that we're utilizing it for. For example, we have cameras at our substation sites, and we're employing better security at our substation sites. So we hope to employ newer technologies to monitor and control the power infrastructure. And so that's kind of how we're using it today. But in the future, we want to be able to capitalize on some of these technologies that are coming out. And I believe that there's going to be kind of a synergistic relationship between wireless and fiber in order to accomplish our goals. And some of those are, with implementing better SCADA systems throughout both our water and power infrastructure, and to bring data to our parks and utilize that data for a lot of different reasons. I mean, and when we think about the future, a lot of times I always refer back to 100 years ago, because I think we're kind of in the same position now as we were 100 years ago. Back when the city obtained the power infrastructure, I don't think they really had an idea of what was coming, and how that power infrastructure or even just electricity would impact their lives in 1908. You can just imagine. And I think we're in the same position today. It's really hard for us to say, in 30 years this is what's going to happen. Well, it wasn't just 8 years ago that we started using iPhones, and maybe it was a little shorter than that. But my point is that we really don't know what's coming, and this fiber infrastructure is really a foundational element to operating a city, not just a city, but business and anything else. And that's what I'd say.
Thank you. Okay, so now we're going to move on to this question of who does it benefit. So for that, we're going to turn down to Todd Marriott for that.
So as Jordan talked tonight, the city is going to use this as infrastructure to utilize it to be more efficient in your city. I think tonight it'd be interesting if you want some more answers to that question when we're in the back. I'd love to talk to you because I think that there's just a myriad of things we'd like to make sure you understand in that regards. But what I'm going to speak to is a little bit the financial benefit for the community. The model that the city's putting forward is intended to benefit from a net welfare position every single resident in the city. And so it does it in this way. The first group there you see would be fixed income. There are those that are on fixed income where every dollar matters. Yet the city is going to be charging or proposing to charge $12.45 for this utility. So how does that benefit them? I would suggest it does in two ways. First of all, the city is going to be more efficient in how it delivers services, both in the short, mid, and long term. That will both save dollars in terms of efficiencies and benefit everyone, just like our roads, our sidewalks, our detention ponds. But financially, those that are on fixed income will note that when that utility is established to their home, it comes with a base connection. That base connection is going to be a very good connection to be able to check your emails, to send genealogy reports, to do the things that you would do. Those that are on fixed income that are using other services right now are probably paying more for the ability to do so. Would now be able to use the base service provided with the utility, and they could save significant amount of money. So fixed income individuals will be better from a net welfare perspective than if the city didn't go forward. Number two are consumers. Because the system is going to be built out ubiquitously, meaning to everyone, the utility will be established allowing a plethora of competing companies to provide access to the internet where you can upgrade to gigabit type services. Those gigabit services, I think they're going to speak to a little bit later in terms of pricing, will be done in a way that's extremely competitive, both in terms of delivery, customer service, and price. So consumers benefit on a net welfare basis as well. Third group will be those that are with Comcast or CenturyLink or similar type service. Almost invariably, almost in every market that we've seen this go, the incumbents do sharpen their pencils. If they don't, you're going to have the ability to use your base service or a much more competitive product anyway. But if someone decides that Comcast is good enough for me, we can discuss later how you might use this to your advantage to have them sharpen their pencils and provide a much more competitive offering. Thus, the net welfare, or that person, even though they stay with Comcast, they're better off because they stayed with it, right? There will be those individuals who have no need for internet and may be indigent and will satisfy the city's public policy requirements to not have to be charged for the utility. Although they will benefit by having the city services be more efficient and help them out, they will be able to qualify not to have to pay the fee at all. So because they're benefiting in general and not having to pay the base fee, they benefit from a net welfare perspective. Finally, the business community benefits. We have some tall, shiny businesses down along the freeway and other parts of our community. Many of those communities, many of those businesses have some fiber options presently available to them. But you could imagine how much more competitive this will be now, where you can have this fantastic fiber network that will provide access to a host more business carrier class type of customers. Because your system will be considered carrier class, meaning that it's able to satisfy the requirements of businesses, those businesses will receive the opportunity to be very competitive. It could and would and will invite businesses to move here. And while it doesn't ensure, just because you have fiber, that companies are going to say, oh, now we're going to move there, it is for certain that if you don't have this type of broadband capability, it is a prohibiting factor from consideration. But we did find in market surveys, especially in Kaysville and other communities, that now more and more of us are doing business from home, right? Companies like JetBlue require a certain type of connectivity. So it's not just tall, shiny businesses. It's those businesses that are in our homes. It's those ability to have people move to the community that can use these services. In so doing, it does increase the value of our homes. And so when you look at it from a totality, the ability to implement this utility benefits every single community member.
Thank you. So one of the biggest questions we receive emails about it, people just asking us, so we thought we would address it directly, is this: why not just wait for 5G? I bet you it's on half your minds. So we are going to address it. We're going to turn it over to Ryan, your IT director, to talk about 5G for a second.
Yeah, so I think, me personally, I want to see 5G in our city, because I think there's a synergistic relationship, like I said earlier, between wireless and wired connections. And I think that, that cities that have fiber have a higher potential to have this infrastructure installed. And you'll see in just a minute that there's a significant amount of that infrastructure that has to be placed in order to make 5G viable. And fiber is a great way to do that. Well, it's the only way to do that, actually, to have that infrastructure in place. And 5G just isn't the only technology that we're looking towards, but we're also looking to the future and the support of other technologies that come on beyond 5G. So as we look at 5G too, we're also looking at what the economic benefit is of 5G and having fiber in the city. And I think that cities that have fiber in their city also benefit from businesses that want to come to the city because we have the infrastructure. And if we have both infrastructures, 5G and fiber, then we'll be more economically viable for those businesses. So as we look at fiber optic installations, this is just a representative. This is the AT&T tower down by the grain mill. Okay, and what it shows is a 1 mile radius, and obviously this cell tower actually covers a little bit more than 1 mile, but not much. And because I know from experience and using this tower, but anyway, so this is a 1 mile radius, and this is its basic coverage from the yellow dot. If you go to the next slide. So this is essentially what you're looking at is so a 5G tower requires to be about 300 to 500 feet apart, and I've read different things. I've even read up to 700 feet, but in most things that I've read, it's right around 5 to 300 feet apart. And those cell towers need to be 35 to 50 feet in the air, so they have to be pretty tall. And our typical street light is like between 25 and 30 feet. So so we have to have these towers, at a significant placement. So this is an overlap, you can see, and it's a 1 mile radius. There's 143 cell sites that are required there with the density, so we would have to have fiber or a company like Verizon would have to install fiber to each one of these sites in order to make it really work well. If you go to the next slide. So the next slide, obviously this is just me cutting and pasting these dots, but so what you see here is an overlap between two different service providers. So now you have a 286 cells in a 1 mile radius, and if you have competing providers, then they're going to want to run their own fiber infrastructure over that. And so what if we had our own fiber? I mean, could we negotiate with them to utilize our fiber and to reduce the amount of cuts we have in the road and provide some kind of a service to them? They're going to want to use our poles, so it's just something to think about. There you go.
Hey, thank you. So with that, we're going to turn back to Andre, and he's going to explain again why the utility model and move into the financials. He, as he mentioned, was a CFO, and so he has come to look at the financials of the project.
So just to kind of make sure everybody understands what we've done in the past year, we actually evaluated 3 different models for fiber deployment. There's a subscriber model, a public-private partnership model, and the utility model. The utility model had the lowest overall cost to residents and the fewest risks associated with it. Using the utility model removes the take rate risk from the subscriber model, which is what many of the initial fiber installations that we hear about failing were because they were subscriber models where they required so many people to sign up to fund the infrastructure. With the utility model, you don't have that risk. The utility model also helps to give complete ownership of the network and the infrastructure to the city and its residents, which means we now dictate what can or can't happen on that network. So we are in control, not some other company that decides what they feel is the best products to provide. We also have analyzed both successful and unsuccessful fiber installations throughout the country to try to identify what would be best for Kaysville. In looking at that, we estimated that doing nothing is kind of our baseline, which is just staying where we're at right now. But we estimated that if we would do a fiber installation, we could save 15 to 25% for the residents in what they're currently paying for internet services. It also, the utility model saves between 10 and 15% over the other two fiber installation models. So we felt it was the lowest cost, least risk option to be able to propose. The next question that everybody wants to know is, well, how much am I going to have to pay for this fiber? So there will be one or two charges on your monthly utility bill. The first is the new fiber utility fee, which will be $12.45 for residential and $21.50 for commercial users. The second line depends on whether or not you upgrade services to a higher internet service package. The ISP fee would be the second line item you would see if you upgrade, and that includes the operations and maintenance expenses to operate and keep the network functioning in the future. The ISP fees should range between $30 and $50 per month for a 250 by 250 megabit residential symmetrical service. Gigabit service would run about $10 to $15 more than the 250 service. Now, these are in addition to the base utility fee that you would be paying. Business class services will range from between $40 and $800 per month, depending on the service level guarantees that the business requires. TV services would be provided by third parties like Google TV, Apple TV Plus, Sling TV, and a whole host of other options. Depending on the number of channels desired, these TV services range between $16 and $60 per month plus taxes and will not be billed through Kaysville City. You will sign up directly with the service provider for those services. Some ISPs may offer bundled TV services in their packages, but we don't have any details at this time to be able to talk to that. For those who wish to continue a home telephone service, they can be acquired for between $8 and $30 per month plus taxes from services like Vonage, Ooma, OneVoIP, and many others. These are also separate services that you would sign up for individually. Some ISPs may also bundle this service within their packages, but again, we don't have details to be able to provide what a bundling package would cost. Given the myriad of choices, it's impossible for us to be able to give you a precise cost that each resident will incur because it will be dependent upon what you want and what you're going to use. And so we can give you an idea, and I'm happy afterwards to talk with anybody. I've got little charts that show the different providers and the costs. So the other question people always ask is, when do I start paying this utility fee? Am I going to pay it years before I get service to me? The answer is that the city is going to be divided into about 50 different sections. As each section of the city has fiber infrastructure installed, then the fiber utility fee will be assessed in that section of the city. So it should be about the same time that your home receives service from the new infrastructure. If you do not have the service installed at your home, people have asked, well, is there going to be a connection fee later in the future? So if you do it at the time we're doing the network installation throughout neighborhoods, there is no installation fee. None. It's part of the $12.45 per month. If you do not have your home installed, say you opt out of having participated in the home installation, then yes, there would be an installation fee in the future when you ask to have that service provided, because then we have to redeploy resources to that neighborhood to do the installation. Right now, we estimate that that installation cost would be $1,000 for a resident. But if you opt out, you will not be paying $12.45, you'll be paying $9.70. That $2.70 represents that $1,000 over a 30-year period. Businesses also will have a similar process that if they do not opt to have installation to their physical structure, they will also have an installation fee in the future, but if they are installed when the network is coming through their area, there is no installation fee. The other question is, how is this going to be funded? It's been proposed that we will issue a 30-year fixed-rate revenue bond to pay for the upfront installation costs. The fiber utility fee and other network lease fees will cover the bond obligation. Operations and maintenance of the network will be funded by residents that elect to upgrade to faster internet service. So how do we know that the costs are correct and that we're not going to end up spending millions more than is expected? We engaged a nationally respected firm, Design 9, to do a feasibility study, and they run a very sophisticated modeling for these types of projects. In fact, they included 4 detailed engineering designs of Kaysville City neighborhoods. We have compared their model to other fiber projects to gain comfort that we have an appropriate understanding of the cost of to complete this project. The feasibility study model included a 10% contingency as well as many conservative assumptions. When compared to the national studies on costs of community fiber projects, we found the Design 9 estimate to be 15 to 25% higher than the actual delivered cost of projects completed, thus confirming a conservative approach to the project costs.
Thank you, Andre. Okay, Jordan, we would like you, we've kind of talked about this, but we just want to go over it again. Just what will the system provide?
Sure. As we mentioned earlier, there will be a $12.45 fee, which also comes with a basic level of internet service. And that would allow emails and browsing, for example. Also blanket connectivity throughout the city and advanced services to business and government entities as well.
Excellent. Sorry. And then how will it work, Jordan?
Sure. So as a resident, this is a good question where today we don't have much of a marketplace in broadband. What I'm excited about is this portal. So you see a graphic up here. When you are connected to the fiber network, it will be an open fiber network, meaning the city will not discriminate against or pick a favorite ISP, for example, but it'll be open to competition. So you can imagine what will happen is there will be a marketplace, and Andre listed some of the ISP names that could participate, and you'll see plans and packages. You see a graphic up there of a laptop, and you will be able to check in real time what the pricing packages are, and these ISPs will be competing for your business, and you'll choose the plan you want. We anticipate there will be some low-cost providers, and there will be some higher-cost providers. You can imagine different levels of quality associated with that, but it will be the idea is that we want to introduce competition into a marketplace that is sorely lacked in that category, and that's what ultimately brings the price down. And I think that summarizes. And there's an I don't know what I'm supposed to say to that, but a superhero flying into the air. And that's the hope of emotion that we hope everyone will feel when they get onto that portal.
Exactly. Okay, so these are 2 other questions that we've sort of addressed one, but we'll just go over it really quickly, Jordan, which is what is the opt-out program? I'll just have Jordan go over that one more time really quickly. And then a question that everybody asks, and I'm sure all of you want to know, is will this tear up your yard? So we'll have Jordan take the first one, and Todd, if you could take up the tear up your yard.
Great. So there's 3 levels of opting out, if you will. If you choose to have the city connect to your home and have the $12.45 service, which is a basic service, you could stop there. Andre mentioned a second line item to the utility bill, which is an ISP fee. So the first choice of opting in or opting out, if you will, is whether or not you want to upgrade your service and choose an ISP. That is 100% optional, and it will just be a marketplace decision. The second level of opt-out is whether or not you want the city to connect a line to your home. And we've preserved the choice for 100% of residents, if should they choose, do not have to connect their home to the fiber network. Andre mentioned the costs associated with that would bring it down from $12.45 to $9.70 per month. So you would save the connection fee. That's the install to your home, that line. And then the third level is similar to the heat programs and welfare programs we have in our utility bills. If you're familiar with the natural gas or electric programs, there is a low-income program for those who are in economic hardship, where you could waive a vast majority of that utility bill all the way down to $1.50 per month.
Thank you. Todd?
So we will be practicing best practice construction services. Depending on the time of year, let's just suggest that you got started building it'll be built out in footprints, or so sections of the city at a time. And so if you were to construct during the months of February and March, it's likely that when you turned on your water sprinklers in May, that we will have hit some water lines. There is some disruption. We typically retain the sprinkler service company and are very responsive to any needs, but the techniques anymore are pretty good about being as least disruptive as possible. But there will be some mess because it's construction. So the intent is to leave it as we found it. In the city, the question, can I answer to roads? Oftentimes, communities will say, well, our roads are already having problems. Is that going to disrupt roads? And again, we're trying to bore and we're trying to do things that don't interrupt the roads. But I would suggest to you that once this network's in place, if this network weren't put in place, there will be a host of other telecom companies coming behind that are going to be doing the same thing, competing to get those towers in place that you saw Ryan put on the screen. By having a network that is designed as an infrastructure to handle that, is hopeful that those telecoms will use that infrastructure and it will be least disruptive in the long term. So the short answer is there will be some disruption. It's construction, but we are going to leave it as we found it.
And just a follow-up, Todd, assuming the city breaks your sprinklers, who would pay for that?
Michelle Barber. No. The company, there will be a construction company that will be in charge of construction, and those that will be doing what they call drops into your yards. Now, it may be one and the same, or they may be separate. But if they disrupt your yard in a way that's not okay, they need to leave it like they found it, and they'll be responsible for doing so, and not Michelle. So I was just...
Okay, so once again, we'll just end here, and we will start with your questions. But we just want to reiterate the 3 key points, which is we believe this is true infrastructure for your city, that you need it for all of these different programs, from power to water to a variety of other systems, education. It benefits everyone, as Todd has gone through. And then finally, it's your money, and you can keep your money locally and reinvest in your own local system. So those are the 3 key points we want to leave you with. And we would like to open it up to you. Now, we ask you a couple things. One is that we have 1 question per person, so we can get through as many as we can. And secondly, if you would start with your name so we can address you properly. We'd appreciate that. And Hillary is going to walk around with the microphone. So we'll call on this gentleman here up, Hillary.
I'll ask her. My question is, I understand that you're planning on using some of the power poles on the east side of the freeway. You won't have yards torn up if you use the power poles, will you?
Yeah, I mean, if we use the power poles, we won't have yards tear up. Obviously, it'll be overhead. And, I mean, there's only a fraction of the city that would be overhead anyway, so most of it would be underground in that case.
I have a question for you, Brig Lewis, and it has to do with the cost. The last time you said that the ISP was going to cost $47.50 a month, and it wasn't going to get any cheaper than that. Well, I'm presently getting my internet
for $49.95 is what the base price is. But at the time they start adding all the other fees and the taxes and the other little things that they add on it, my bill is now just over $67 for that $49 thing. And if we start going down your path here, you're going to be very quickly, I'm going to be paying more, because I'm guessing that 45 is going to have these other fees on it that they haven't told you about. I'm concerned that this is not going to be cheaper. This is going to be much more expensive.
So let me address a couple points. I mean, great question, because I think that's what a lot of people are worried about. So presently, Congress of the United States has not allowed for taxation of internet services, but there is taxation on telephone and TV services. And so that's generally when you see taxes, that's where they come. Now the fees are assessed by the company. And so those current ISPs, they add fees and try to put it down in the tax section to make you think that it's something they're obligated to charge you. They are not. So in looking at this, the internet service itself will not have any taxes or fees. The only fee is the utility fee that you will be receiving. I understand.
Can we just do a side note? Andre, will the utility fee stay the same? Could you speak to that in terms of prices going up? I'd like to address that really quickly.
So from the utility fee perspective, since we are going to get a fixed rate bond, we know what the payment obligation is, and the utility fee will cover that obligation for the term of the bond. So there should be no reason to raise the utility fee during the term of the bond.
Todd?
Nothing drives me more crazy either, Mr. Lewis, than that. They do hide and embed a lot of fees in the bottom that are just part of their operational costs so that they can demonstrate a lower service fee to you. The nice thing about the network is it will be open access. So there will be multiple service providers who will be competing for your service. And if somebody does that to you, you can opt for somebody who's much more transparent.
Could you repeat the question? You don't have a microphone, so he couldn't hear you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I can't answer that specifically, but I'm not aware of a tax being added to the fiber utility.
One follow-up I heard someone ask really quickly. Andre mentioned that the utility fee is not expected to go up, but someone out there said, and then after the bond's paid off. So Andre, could you speak to that really quickly?
Well, really, that's going to be up to a future city council as to what they do. I can tell you my opinion, my recommendation, but I can't project in 30 years what they're going to do. I really can't.
Okay. Go ahead.
My name is Mike Flood. My question is for Ryan, but I do have a quick question and follow-up to this gentleman's. So are you saying that the ISP will not be taxed? The ISP provides a service, but they will not be taxed?
Generally, internet services only are not allowed to be taxed in the United States. The Congress of the U.S.
So you're saying the ISP, there will not be a...
Now, it doesn't mean it won't ever happen.
There will not be a tax on his bill, my bill, or anybody else's, that it's a use tax.
If all you're doing is the internet services, there should not be any taxes on that.
Okay. Glad to hear that on record. Mr. Judd, quick question for you. You read off a litany of cost savings that you indicate that the city is going to have by installing fiber. A myriad of things, metering and being able to video this and see that. And I've read the list myself and other sources. Do you have a cost? Do you have an actual number, an annual number that you've figured out that we're going to save by taking out this $30 million bond?
No.
Plus interest.
I don't have anything that's
So you don't have
concrete. No.
So you throw out all these lists of items, you don't really know how much the city's going to save.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there you go.
Come over.
Randy Valposi, I am in favor of fiber being brought to us by the city. I like the utility model. I think my question would be, and I've heard this a lot recently, that people feel like this decision is being rushed. And so my question would just be, can you give us background on what the process has been to get to this point, and kind of piggybacking on that, what the process will be, say, for a broken line that has to be replaced or any type of maintenance in the future? Where does that come into play?
Jordan, would you like to speak to
Sure.
that?
I can speak to the first half about the process. So I started hearing about fiber first when it came to the ring that circled the city around to the substations, being on the Kaysville City Power Board. And I know there was exploration going on even then about what the scope of fiber to the home looks like. We officially got started with this technical advisory committee a year ago, almost exactly a year ago. I think it was in September when we had our very first meeting. And I can tell you that the first several months was drinking from the fire hose experience for those of us volunteering on the committee. We drafted and sent out an RFP shortly, I think it was around December. I could be wrong, November or December. Yes, RFP is a request for proposal. And that was a learning and educational exercise of getting bids from various providers, and they would be names you would recognize. I don't think it's public what those responses were, but that was hundreds and hundreds of pages from providers of different models, different ways they would propose bringing fiber to our city. We had conversations with them. We poured through the pages of work. After getting that, Andre designed kind of a model based on what we thought was the best option from those. And then we received approval to have a third-party independent firm, Design 9, come and review that work and also conduct their own study. That happened throughout the spring and led to, I'll also mention we had a couple public open houses and some podcasts put out on Facebook sharing this progress. In June, we presented to the council the results of the study of Design 9, combined with our own research and these RFPs we'd received, and made a recommendation to go forward with the utility model. And from there, I think for those in this room, you've probably followed the progress since then. That's why you're here. But throughout July and August, we've had neighborhood meetings. We've had other open houses, reaching out to engage citizens and receive feedback, and that's also why we're here tonight. And I'm not sure if I missed anything, but that's kind of the general. And then there was a second part of your question, and I apologize for taking so long on the first half.
Just in terms of these projects in general, it's really important to have the public support, and then that means that we have to be really responsive to issues that come up, both good and bad. And so if issues come up, there will be a way to electronically or telephonically contact an operational system that will be very responsive in terms of customer service and remedying the issue. That's just really important because we need you to not only love the fiber, but not be put off by the process.
Sure. So the operation and maintenance is paid. There's a, if you will, an ISP lease fee for them to use the network to provide internet services to citizens. So a portion of the fee you pay to that ISP stays with Kaysville to actually provide money to do the operations and maintenance. So we would then have people engaged, whether that's city staff or whether it's a contracted service, to go fix a broken line if somebody cuts it or something else happens. If we have to upgrade, and we have built in the model, upgrades every few years to switching gear that would be out supporting the network. So as Jordan says, fiber itself has no speed limit, but the equipment that connects the fiber is where you have your limitations, and over time that will be upgraded, and we've built that into the model to upgrade it.
Hi, my name is Sid Williams. I'm in favor of fiber. The question I have is when I connect, and if I have choices of which provider, who makes the switch on the actual connection? Is that individual homes or is it neighborhoods? Who would it be? Kaysville City? That's kind of two questions. I'm sorry. who makes the actual physical connection? Would it be Kaysville City, or would it be the provider? Who does that?
Okay, so if I understand your question right, you're asking who's actually running the fiber into my home. Is that your question?
No.
Who's activating the service at my home? Okay. Okay, yeah. So you have fiber in your home. You have this portal we kind of talked about, right? And you log into the portal, and you pick the service, and like what we've seen in Ammon, Idaho, they have a portal they log into. They see the prices of the different providers, and they pick the provider. They click submit, and it instantly changes you from one provider to the other. I mean, it's software-defined networking essentially. So it's instantaneous. That's what we've been looking at. Other providers do it a little differently. Utopia, for example, does it a little differently. From what I understand, they have a portal where you can go in and pick it, but then there's a back-end process that happens. And so I'm not quite familiar with exactly how that works. But
We just log in and then see the prices, choose who we want, the software will then connect us up.
yeah, we're looking at what our options are in that regard. And actually last Monday, a week ago, I went up to Ammon, Idaho, and actually looked at their installation, and it was pretty slick. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Laura Flood, and I just want to know if someone could explain why the RFP bid results have not been made public, and what can happen, what can we do to make them public?
So we actually did make the RFP information public. It's in the models that we did the comparisons on the website. There isn't hundreds of pages. Well, the bids are not public, but the information about them was listed out in the website where we're not going forward with those bids.
As a part of those bids, there was proprietary information in them, and they didn't want them released. That was why.
So I would just recommend that as a technical advisory committee, we're not experts in the law for the city, but we do have the city manager and some city council members who may be a little more familiar with that. So I don't think it would be as effective as a volunteer. Ryan's the only city employee here. And I don't mean to punt the question, I just want it to be answered by the best, I guess, minds in the room, so.
I think to that question, after the meeting, we're going to have some question and answers specific to different areas. I note that your city manager and mayor and some council members are here, and I think that'd be a good question for you to address at that point.
That this fiber network would also help other utilities, such as perhaps the very troubled Kaysville Power. It's been, not the greatest utility model. Kaysville Power has had some real struggles, and it needs a great upgrade. So would this system somehow help the power service as well?
Yeah, first of all, Kaysville Power actually is pretty amazing, and I live in West Point, so I'm a West Point city resident, and my power service is Rocky Mountain Power, and I would dare say that I would much rather live in Kaysville because Kaysville Power is pretty good. Yeah. Okay, but. Oh yeah. Yeah, you're all overhead up there. Yeah, I understand that, and I just want to say but I see that in my own neighborhoods that there's issues. But yes, I do believe that having fiber will help improve that infrastructure, and I know that there's already been talks about how we can utilize existing fiber in the substations to improve some of the functions there, and I think over time we'll have a good plan on how to actually implement some of those changes, improvements.
My name is Greg Ferguson. I have a question regarding the actual connections from the lines that go down the neighborhoods to the homes. I live in King Clarion too, and there is power basically overhead, but there are probably as many different situations as there are homes in Kaysville on how that connection is going to be run and how it's going to be made. Some people have very large properties, some people have very small properties. As I understand it, the $12.45 is all that there will be no fee for making that installation regardless of the situation that you encounter. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. And so it's similar to, for example, on the power utility, we have a basic service fee of, what is it, $6? $8, thank you, of $8, and it's the law of averages. We do cost of service studies to segregate different customer classes where there's certain characteristics we can group together and assign the costs as efficiently as possible. So for example, we did do that sort of study with the fiber and have divided up into commercial or business class and residential class. And then within those buckets, we've been able to average kind of the law of averages to come up with the 1245.
That's an important issue, especially in King Clarion, because there is some mixed, some is underground and some is on poles. And I had Comcast when they twice came up to install at my home and then said they couldn't do it. And I ended up having to dig it up mostly myself in order to get that in. I just want to be sure that they're not going to get to my home and say, oh, sorry, we're going to have to charge you a couple $1,000s to get it in.
So one of the keys there is that as part of this project, it will be engineered. So they'll go through trying to find what is the most effective way to be able to connect the neighborhoods and optimize how you utilize that fiber ring and the fiber installation. So specific situations like that would be addressed when they engineer that neighborhood.
But not charged for.
Yeah, there'd be no extra charges. No, that's what I say. It's built into an averaging across all citizens.
The final question, which also relates to this, is you mentioned that this would be put in sections, and did you say 50 different areas at a time? I mean, before it's done, and that you wouldn't be charged the $12.45 until the connection was made to your home. Is it turned on when that connection made, or do we have to start paying for it and then wait for a year until the connection is hooked up for the whole system?
Yeah, if you're able to get service, that's when you're charged. So once you are lit, in other words, we get it into your troublesome property, and now I'm worried. No, I'm just kidding. And speaking to that, the engineering, that's why this is such an important model, because it does encompass everyone in the community, both more troubled builds and easier builds, and combine them overarchingly so that you can use it as a utility, and that's why it's able to do that. But no, you're not charged until an O&T, a box, is put in your home and lit and ready to go. Yeah, so I'm not quite certain what we mean by 1050, but in the model, it showed it's showing a 1245 and it's a 2150 on the business. So those numbers come from a construction modeling that is very conservative. At this point in history, we have a really good idea of the types of soils you have, the overhead you have. We figure in rock adder, which means, and there's no rock in your soil, right? But we figure it in. And I've lived here, I had to dig my mom's trees, so I know there's rocks there. And so we figure those in. Then we add contingencies in there. We make certain that we're on the high end of it. We're not trying to give it rosy figures. We're trying to beat ourselves up in terms of modeling. Then we compare that modeling engineering and we extrapolate it to different sections. Once that's done, we look at other type of builds in this area. We look at national builds as well. We look at all those numbers, and I can tell you that your mayor and your TAC, or your Technical Advisory Committee, has done a phenomenal job of vetting that. Having Andre nipping at our heels all the time is troublesome because he picks up on every one of those things. But we are very conservative on those models so that construction's not this big black hole that sometimes it's made out to be. It's pretty definitive. And when it's engineered correctly, we follow those engineering plans. This is basically plumbing. And so I think to Councilmember Adams' comment, we anticipate completely that your construction falls within those parameters that are being set forth because the engineering, the modeling, everything meets those parameters in a very conservative fashion.
So maybe I can address, so the bonding, there's a couple of nuances with that. Generally speaking, with bonds, revenue bonds, they don't allow for early prepayment without penalty. And so I can't, that's going to be up to the city council to determine, but once there is an adequate reserve developed for this utility, like we have in the electric utility, to cover contingencies, to cover repairs or unknown disasters, then my recommendation absolutely has been that it would go down to pay down the bonds early or reduce the utility fee.
Ryan, could you jump back to that 5G coverage map? Oh, sure. A couple questions. This is kind of a 100% home run out of the park, whole city coverage map, right?
No, this is 1 square mile.
So it's 1 square mile, but it's 100% of that 1 square mile, is what I'm saying. I understand it's 1 square mile. I'm just saying that's your scenario of what it would take to cover that 1 square mile.
For one company.
For one company. So you talked about... So
4 square miles, actually.
Yeah, that other picture you showed just a second ago, that one right there. You talked about, if it was required to have 300-400 yard separation between antennas, 30-40 feet in the air and so forth. First of all, that's kind of a horrifying picture because the antennas are actually as big as a coffee can. They sit on top of city street lights and so forth. As far as a real-world scenario of co-location monopoles at 100 feet, 60 feet, even 90 feet in the air, it's Kaysville City's policy to co-locate that tower. So you have to have 3 or 4 carriers on that tower. So by putting in 25, and for $18 million, I'll take that contract in a heartbeat, by the way, 25 monopoles and offer those co-locations to all 4 carriers, it gives what the citizens want, and that is a choice of 5G coverage. 5G is not here yet for GLTEs in Kaysville, and it gets anywhere from 90 to 177 megabytes per second download. You're talking about 250 megabytes for $65 on this guy's bill. That's not a return on investment over 30 years. You also mentioned that a small cell distribution, neighborhood by neighborhood for total coverage, just to keep it apples to apples, would require all 4 carriers having their own installation. That's not true either because Cottonwood Canyon has what's called a DAS system. And that DAS system offers and honors the signals up and down the canyon to maintain the beauty of the canyon. Your cell phone signal on all 4 carriers, AT&T, T-Mobile, Sprint, and Verizon. So it can be done in a very obscure manner. It doesn't have to be a big rodeo type of a situation. And again, to provide this city with great 5G coverage would take less than 25 towers.
Well, I think I would just point you to Sacramento, who thought the same thing. You could go tonight and look it up. They did it on a big Super Bowl deal, and I would ask you to maybe Google that on YouTube and look at how many towers they've now employed and still haven't had the coverage. But I think that regardless of how many towers, the system will be built as an infrastructure with capacity and flexibility to facilitate 25 or facilitate 10 or facilitate hundreds. And what it ever actually ends up being at the end of the day, I think is immaterial for our conversation, other than it's going to be built as infrastructure so that it could facilitate any of those topology builds that you talk about. And the city would recognize significant revenue from that. No, I'm not. I'm no longer with Utopia. I'm an independent consultant. I did come back in 2008 when Utopia was at its most difficult point and develop models that helped produce them to a net revenue position.
Can I just add real quick to what Todd said? Just, I know we mentioned this before, but our goal wouldn't be to compete with these towers at all, but to facilitate it. And as I mentioned before, it'd be an open, competitive network. So we would love for Verizon and T-Mobile and AT&T and whoever, we would love for them to use it. And in fact, I think it could accelerate them using it and generate some additional revenues for the city to go back towards the citizens. And so in energy, we talk about an all-of-the-above policy where you have coal, natural gas, solar, wind, all of these things work together. I think it's similar here. We're not trying to pick winners or losers with this. We're trying to build a foundation that will support all of the telecommunications options and bring more options to choose from in the city.
My name is Mark True. Just a quick question. In regards to the installation of the fiber network, first of all, I'm very much in favor of a fiber network in our city. But will the installation company be able to utilize our currently owned by the city utility lines and conduits for the installation to minimize the disruption to the city and to residences all the way up to the home? And then the second part of that is, will developers developing new communities in our city bear the cost of the installation of those lines, similar to the way they have to bear the cost of the installation of the electrical utilities?
Yeah, so we anticipate utilizing the existing right-of-ways, and we really don't have much conduit to speak of. The infrastructure we have for fiber, we anticipate utilizing that as a part of this project to some fashion. So does that answer your question? Okay.
So in the second part, for new construction, the city is working right now on new guidelines for new construction and what would be required to be able to be prepped for fiber installation in those neighborhoods. And we did put that each new residential unit would be charged $2,700 in their permit to be able to cover their portion of the infrastructure cost. And businesses would also have an upfront fee as well if they build a business. Sorry, there was one, Michelle just wanted me to clarify. So when they do that upfront payment with their building permit, they would only have a $1.50 utility fee because they've already paid all the infrastructure upfront.
Frank Lever, I own a business on the west side, and we currently have fiber optics. I'm really happy with it. So if I understand correctly, however, I will end up paying Kaysville a tax of approximately $20 a month to not receive fiber from you. Is that correct?
So most companies I'm aware of like to have redundancy. If it were my business, I would look at this. So to this question first, what I would look at is that this is going to establish a very competitive. If you like your fiber now, how would you like it more competitive? And so I think that that's what you'll see, is the ability to compete and provide more competitive services for what you have. But if you like what you have and it's established, what that would provide you is a basic internet connectivity or a redundancy in case that fiber route that you already have goes down. Then you could use your basic fiber to retain services. I think that that would be for businesses, a great insurance backup.
Now, so So if I can specifically answer the question, just like with the residential, if you decline to have the fiber brought to the facility, then your fee actually will drop for the cost that we don't incur to bring fiber to the facility. So on a business side, it drops from $21.50 to about $13 a month.
My name is Ben Lever. I have a question regarding, I guess, the length of the bond. You said tonight, and I wasn't aware of this, the bond cannot be retired early without some penalties. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you did say that. This relates, I guess, twofold. One is, as has been mentioned going back months, that there's a good portion of the city that will be covered by aerial fiber in order to facilitate that. The length of the bond relative to the life expectancy, aerial fiber, hardware and infrastructure is a concern. What's the response about that?
So for the bond, like I say, there's nuances in how municipal bonds work. Generally, the bond issuers, those that provide the funding, like to know that they're going to be able to have that bond outstanding for at least 10 years. And so usually at year 10, you can do prepayments without penalty, and it doesn't cost you additional money up front to get those bonds. And that's certainly what we are hoping to be able to build in so that we could pay down bonds faster if the project is highly successful. If, like I say, in the first probably 10 years, that would be building a reserve and then perhaps dropping the fiber fee, but that would be up to the city council at that point to decide that. As to the length of fiber life, if you go out to Corning's website, they have studies where they have pulled fiber that is 40 and 50 years old, and there's zero degradation within the fiber. Buried, but also under sea. So in probably a very inhospitable environment. But, well, aerial, the 15 years is not an estimate of life. That is a warranty that they guarantee the fiber will work for at least 15 years. So that's like your car warranty, saying the car has a 3-year warranty. That doesn't mean the car has a 3-year life.
No, serious, that's a big deal in a city.
So our buildings right now are connected via aerial to fiber. We have a line that runs aerially down here from 100 North to the freeway, which dips down onto the freeway, and then it goes up aerial over the railroad tracks. And so that infrastructure has been in since 2005, and I mean it's still as viable as it was in the very beginning when we installed it. So I think that the longevity of the fiber is there, and I don't think that there will be much of an issue as long as we pre-engineer it and do a good job at making sure that the infrastructure that we're putting it on is going to be there for the duration. But yeah,
I think please keep in mind too that the cost of fiber is not the biggest cost inherent in the network. It is the construction costs and getting it in the ground. Fibers can be overlashed. Kaysville is uniquely positioned so that if fiber did wear out on the poles, it can simply be overlashed. And so that's not where a great deal of the cost is. It's getting it in the ground and the construction cost to do so.
Let's do maybe 2 more, and then we'll do the small group breakouts. 3? Okay.
My name is Eric Isom, and had the opportunity to work in the communications industry for about 12 years. And I have a lot of questions, but I know time is limited, and I have one question specifically about, and this is nothing against our good mayor and council members. I know they've done their due diligence on this effort looking at a fiber network for our city. But my concern as a resident, if I'm looking at a 30-year obligation, whether I sign up for the service or not, I would love the opportunity to vote on that obligation. And I know we have a representative government here, and I'm grateful for those who serve in Kaysville City, but I just would respectfully ask why residents aren't given the opportunity to vote. Was it viewed that that's too risky, and that's why we're getting an obligation with utility fee potentially?
As we indicated earlier, as a technical advisory committee, we are volunteers. We do not have any authority. So that question is best have with the council members and the mayor. We can't answer that. But
Yeah, I could talk kind of loud. So I think first of all, I'd like to address a little bit of this. Oh, so should I over here?
Give him a mic.
Thank you. So I think first of all, I'd like to just briefly address the risks. And clearly there are risks. That's the business I'm in, and my day job is risks, an insurance company covering risks of all kinds. And of course there are risks, but the question is, risks compared to what else? Compared to the alternative. And the nice thing about this utility model is it is the lowest risk of anything, any other particular design that has been used. And that's one advantage to Kaysville going after Layton, Centerville, Provo, Farmington, is that we've been able to study all the different models and what is the lowest risk and the lowest cost. And as a Kaysville citizen and a representative, I would want to have the lowest cost and lowest risk. Not that there's no risk, and these are excellent questions as far as how you deal with them. But don't we deal with that, okay, I'm going to answer the question. But I first wanted to talk about that. So we have the best model available right here. I strongly believe that. And the other thing that I would say is we have a democratic republic with representative government. I thought the question was, why shouldn't we vote on it? And I'm answering that. Yes, okay, listen to me. We have a representative form of government. Revenue bonds are voted on by the city. And I will tell you one risk factor if you're worried about the financial risk. A GO bond that would be, if the people vote on it, is full faith and credit of the city. That means all the taxing power of the city could be used. Now, I still think it's incredibly low risk because of the utility model that we're using, but a revenue bond only relies on that 1245 fee. Both of those are fixed. The costs are fixed, the revenue is fixed. That's why it's low risk. And I'm telling you right now that, I'll tell you another reason why we have a representative form of government. Because I see this every day. It's one of the reasons I ran. The misinformation, the emotions, the demagoguery that is used by many politicians to listen with itching ears and then provide not what people, their true values are, not what their true needs are, and the fundamental human concerns that need to be taken care of as efficiently as possible, but merely emotion used to drive a certain position. And I can tell you right now, if the city were to put this out to a referendum, what you would have is you would have the interests who are opposed to it, and there's nothing wrong with this, who have to answer to shareholders, who have a model, cash cow model that works currently. It took years and years. I've lived in Kaysville for 34 years until just recently, finally, we got Xfinity. And it's a little faster, but I still have latency on teleconferencing. It's the upload that is probably the non-symmetrical service that is the worst. But certainly we have freedom in this country to advocate. And yes, we could put it on the ballot. We could decide to do that. But I can tell you right now it would be a very one-sided argument. This is a very controversial issue, and I shouldn't bring it up, but we have made some mistakes in Kaysville when we have had people vote that have ended up costing taxpayers a lot of money. And I refuse to let that happen on my watch, to have an inferior system that costs more, because we have to be silent. There can only be one side to the argument. In, I think it was Fort Collins, Comcast, I have their service right now for internet. Spent $900,000. Councilman Adams points out that Kaysville is a little smaller city. 33,000 as opposed to, I think, 70,000 in Fort Collins, so maybe they spend half of that. But it's going to be one-sided. They're going to say your streets are going to fall apart. They're going to say that services will be impacted. All totally untrue, because this is an enterprise fund, totally dependent on the utility fee, has nothing to do with the general fund. It will be in an enterprise fund. The two will not mix. That will never happen. Where roads or any other essential service, if I thought that that was the case, I would be totally opposed. And if I thought that this didn't put money back in the pockets of every Kaysville resident, I was listening to the UN just recently. In the poor African nations, guess what? One of the major things they want to put in is broadband service, and probably first maybe electricity to those areas where they can use satellites to beam down microwave energy because they can't put in the infrastructure. But we don't need to put, if we put fiber in, that's future-proof. If 5G, any of these other wireless technologies come, they can build on that backbone. They don't have to put something else in. So you're darn right I'm going to vote on this because we've studied it and we know. But to try and explain that with one hand tied behind our back when only the interests that are opposed to it because of their cash cow models, because they don't want the competition, because they would prefer the monopoly, is that what we want in Kaysville? Or do we want a community-owned representative government where all we're doing is putting in the infrastructure? And I can tell you, this is essential infrastructure now. And it will become even more so in the future. Just as much as roads, whether it's healthcare, whether it's emergency services delivery. Somebody asked about the exact cost. How can we know that? Did we know the exact benefit to society when the Wright brothers first flew? Did we know when we first went to the moon that every dollar spent on NASA would return $10 in spin-offs, would pay for itself and would change the way we live and would improve the way we live? Do we really want to fall behind every other community around us and nationally, and even communities in Africa that have broadband, high-speed internet service that they're working on? So to answer your question, yes, in a representative form of government, you vote for representatives. I was only in 4 years. I have absolutely no conflict of interest. I'll still live here in Kaysville. I've been here 34 years. And you bet, you elect representatives to go study these issues, not just decide on their own, but hire experts. This idea, I've heard this idea on the responsible government thing. That's fine, responsible internet. But you know that no independent source, we had the same problem. After the Arthur Anderson debacle, the federal government said, oh, you have to be independent expert. But guess what? They found out very quickly there are no independent experts. That when someone wants to, sorry to keep talking, but that we have to pay.
Mike, come on.
You have to pay for expertise. So when we pay, and what conflict of interest does an independent study have? They don't care. They don't care what the results of that independent study is. We merely contracted with them to say, what is the best system?
Yeah, I think if we want to speak to your council member, why don't we break up now to the different groups, and he will be right there.
I didn't know we filibustered. All right, so my name's Chad Curtis. I was on the planning commission to the city to our north, the large city to our north, back in the early 2000s. I heard a very similar presentation to what I just heard today back at that time frame. And right now, according to the numbers, well, a year ago, Layton City had 50% of their houses were able to connect to their public utility fiber that they presented. So now we're 15 years into this process and they only have 50% of the city connected. So I don't want to sound like condescending or anything, but it's truly in my mind, like, what makes us believe that we can do it better, and what have we looked at and learned from that situation to make it better? Because I feel like we're getting into a lane that government doesn't belong in.
Well, I think I can speak directly to Utopia, having had that experience, that Utopia made a lot of mistakes. They just did. They got started early. Their model was incorrect, and they thought that if they built it, they would just come. And when I got there in 2008, we were burning $1 million a month, and it was trouble. And if I could have run back home to Colorado, I'd have done it. But we just started building and working. From that time forward, models were put in place by that team and by those cities that did start best practices. Today, Utopia, its sister entity UIA, are driving net revenues, and they're very successful. When you talk about Layton, it just got started way late. It's only recently that that's been able to be brought online because of those mistakes in earlier years. So the modeling that we see, the successful models out there, Chattanooga, others that are successful, those business practices and those that we employed are going to be employed here. We don't have to be pioneers in that. And I don't mind, I know we got to stop, but I just would like to speak to Eric. Eric, I have the deepest respect for Eric because I've sat across the aisle from him many times, and I wish that he were on my team. He is awesome, and he is great at what he does. And CenturyLink, which he worked for many years, got a great deal with him because he's good at what he does. But in every community that we went, every single one, CenturyLink was able to bring in people like Eric and great people, and Comcast are great people, and really able to add a great deal of pressure to a community to muddle the issue. I would just go back briefly and just say that you are better off from a net welfare, financially net welfare perspective, every single resident, if this is put in place than if you don't do it. And I think that is what you need to vet. And if that's the case, then this is going to benefit every single resident of Kaysville. Kathy?
If I can just add to the question specifically, Layton was a subscriber model where it was totally dependent upon the take rate. If people did not sign up, the model didn't work. In this, we're not using a take rate model for subscribers. It's a utility model which guarantees the most efficient construction because you're installing every home as you go along rather than going back and forth trying to do it as people sign up.
I've got a few things. To that point, though, most efficient at construction in the peak of the economy. I mean, boring prices have gone from 11 a foot to 20 a foot and could be going to 40 a foot, okay? And to the comments that were made about me by Councilmember Garn, I will say to that where is Comcast and CenturyLink now? We have heard tonight from a Councilmember Garn, and I believe, I won't speak for the rest of the council members in the room, but it's apparent the way their vote is leaning or already going. But we've heard from Councilmember Garn specifically that his vote has been made. He's going to vote for this. So if Comcast and CenturyLink are paying attention, which they probably are, I would implore and ask us, where are they now? They know this is happening. So if this goes to a ballot and they do what he says and they're going to come and start pouncing on us, trying to educate us away from voting for this, I would say, why aren't they here now? So I think it's a moot point. I think we can rest, and they have a right to do whatever they're going to do, just like you've been filibustering for the project. Okay, Todd, I have a question for you. You say, and you use specific terminology, say we are going to hit some water lines, and then you say we are going to leave it as we found it. And I'm not concerned about a broken sprinkler line. I would like to ask you directly, as a follow-up to this gentleman's over here, I'd like to know more of your involvement, Todd. Would you please be willing to share that with the taxpayers who are current? My understanding is you are a temporary PR guy to help this come along. And the context was that you were originally hired to help this get to the ballot. So could you explain to us your involvement? Are you planning on being involved through the entire project, filled out?
Yes, I have a couple questions on what you said too, but I wasn't ever hired as a PR person. Your PR firm is here tonight, and we'll
say that again. Who? Kryptonite?
So I was never hired as a PR person. Your PR firm is here tonight, Wilkerson Ferrari, and their representative and are putting and hosting the meeting tonight. I am a technical consultant, so when I suggest we, I'm acting as part of a committee. I was not brought to put this to not a vote or a vote. I'm here to provide my technical expertise, having been involved in this before. And the question I had in terms of $40 a linear foot in boring, I just didn't know where you got that figure.
I'm just saying speculative. It could, with the way the economy's going. There's a lot of speculation going on your part.
It could go to $100 a linear. But right now in the market, what we're seeing is likely.
I'm not here as a specialist.
If we were to bond right now, you're likely to go. It would be probably expensive to be about 15 to 18 a linear foot in boring. That's what we're seeing across the board. And if you look over a 2 to 3 year build, you look historically. That's where you would see it. So to suggest that it's going to 40, I was thinking, gosh, maybe you knew something quantitative that I didn't know. But the model does reflect those costs that he's talking about. So when we talked earlier about making certain we're good on construction costs, they do reflect that safe modeling in terms of construction management.
Thank you, Todd. Question for anyone else on the panel. What are you going to do when people don't pay their fee, their mandatory fee? As late as today, I've had people say, my house is paid off, I'm not going to let you bring a fiber line to me, and I am not going to pay the fee. Go ahead and lien it. I don't care. I'm going to die in my home, and the mortgage is gone anyway.
You know,
What are you going to do?
Councilmember Adams, that is not for us to decide as a committee. Ours is to recommend the best way to encourage this project and to bring it back successfully. The city council and departments would determine what happens if somebody doesn't pay, not us.
You are running for council, correct, Andre?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Oh, well, you already said that.
What is your alternative? You said you're for what is your alternative?
I'll do it without filibustering. Put it on the ballot. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. Hello? Okay.
These are awesome questions. Our concern is...
I just have a last one. Oh, sorry, Todd.
Sorry.
And this one's on point. So it's also been said throughout, and this is an easy one, guys, at ease, fellas, okay? It's also been said, though, that some of the power lines are going to be buried along with this project. And it was answered a little soft when I kind of heard that question put out. So are we kind of budgeting for both worlds a little bit? Is there some anticipation? Jordan, you're on Power Committee. Why don't you take this one? Are we anticipating also burying some power lines out of these monies?
So I'll tag team with Ryan, but I know the power company is also looking at burying lines, and I think it's going to be a coordinated effort. There are neighborhoods that have been troubled. I think a couple of those individuals spoke earlier today. There's a $250,000 not feasibility study, but grid reliability study currently underway just because of that problem. They're looking at every transformer at every home to figure out where are the soft spots, where are the troublesome spots. I would anticipate that the fiber project is going to do a similar type analysis, and together with those two data points, I think you would see the strategic areas where it would be most cost effective to bury some lines. Ryan, do you want to?
Yeah, and I think part of the model too showed that we were going to recondition some of those overhead installations, and there's a percentage in the model that will take care of heavy. I'm not sure of the terminology, but it's a heavy and light make ready, and then there's also a piece in there that covers replacement. So of power poles.
Thanks to all of you. Thanks for the hard work you put in. Just a quick person. Todd, have you ever met a good friend of mine, Keith Maines?
Yep.
I think the mayor would like to say something really quickly. And then what we'll do, as soon as she's done, we will stay here as long as you want. So each of these gentlemen will go back in front of one of the boards, and they would just love to take your questions and speak one-on-one with you. So please don't leave. And there are treats in the back. You can't leave without treats. So let's listen to the mayor really quickly.
All I want to say is that I appreciate all the questions and comments that have come forward. All the questions and asking the tough questions has made this a better project. And so whether you like the final outcome or not, I want you to feel like you made a difference, because you have. The questions that you have asked really have impacted this project. And this is what a community does. So I know it's been a little bit chippy tonight, and I think that's because everybody cares about Kaysville. And we want what's best for Kaysville. And I just want to appreciate you and say thank you for caring enough to spend 2 hours with us tonight. So thanks.